Our first reading will serve as a responsive reading to put these simple words of confession and confidence in the people of the resurrection, those who have their eternal hope tied with the fact that Jesus lives. This reading will serve also as the basis for the sermon today. I invite you to speak it with me responsively by speaking the words in bold print. Oh, that my words were recorded, that they were written on a scroll, that they were inscribed with an iron tool on lead, or engraved in rock forever. I know that my Redeemer lives, and that in the end he will stand on the earth. And after my skin has been destroyed, yet in my flesh I will see God. I myself will see him with my own eyes, I and not another. How my heart yearns within me. The word of the Lord. In the name of the one who has given us new birth into a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead. Dear Christian friends, for a quick moment this morning, I want you to think about and take a general accounting for everything that you know. All the fun facts, the figures, the information that's constantly swimming around in your head. It's a lot. And I'll let you play the games of what do you know or did you know with your family on the ride back from church this morning. But just as a quick general accounting, think of it all. The personal information. You know your shoe size, your social security number, your address, the places you've lived, the name of your doctor, the name of those closest to you. You know the book facts. 2 + 2 = 4. 8 × 8 = 64. You know the dates. 1945, 1776. You might even be able to list some elements on the periodic table. You know that street knowledge, that tangible, workable knowledge. You know the fastest route from your home to this place this morning. All the roads that you placed. You know the takeout places closest to you. You know if a problem arises at work, you know the people that you have to go to solve it. And the people and how to talk to them. The information that you know and use constantly. It's a lot. But for all the information and the knowledge that you know, there is just as much, if not more, that you don't know. The shoe size and the social security number of those around you in this room. 5, 10, 100 times as much information that you do not know. And you might be able to give the very good case to me this morning that the information you don't know just isn't useful. It just isn't practical. It doesn't affect me much. Easter provides us an opportunity to be very clear on what knowledge and what fact is vitally worth knowing. What remains true of you and all people forever, and what else just falls by the wayside, almost as non-important. Our friend Job that we heard about in our first lesson, he knew a great deal, friends. He knew what it meant to be a father. But first a father, a husband. He knew all of those little things about his wife that would get under his skin. He knew when to hold his tongue and when to say something, how to be a supportive husband. He knew what it meant to be a father. Not just the middle names and the birth dates of one boy or one girl, but 9 children. What activities would keep them engaged and what food would most likely be pushed to the edge of the plate for which child. He knew what it meant to be a successful businessman. The circles that he had to run in, how to divide his time so that things got done, that people were overseen. So much so that that book of Job calls him the greatest man in the East, most well known. Above all, he knew what it meant to fear God and to shun evil. in all of his doings and actions in all of the various respects and hats of life. And yet Job is not one of those biblical names that has seemed to make the jump from the sacred to the secular. One of those names that we don't know and the general population knows without having to be a Bible scholar because of all of the information that he knew, how he excelled in all of the areas of life. No, people know Job because of his intimate, close knowledge of suffering. In a matter of hours in Job's life, everything that he thought he knew about being a husband and a father and a businessman and a member of society and a friend was turned on its head. After a freak storm crushed his house and destroyed everything in it. Got reports back that all of his children were dead, that his net worth that was counted in livestock had all run away or been ransacked, that his friends and his family, just confused as he would those that are still living, what to make of it all. And what ate at Job so very much was the one thing that he did not know. Why he must suffer. What good was any of it to know what it meant to be anything? Why was he suffering? His friends and his wife, they thought they knew. His wife assumed, and probably for good reason, that God was angry at Job. That he had kept some secret or done something against God or against her, and now it was the best course of action, Job, just to cut ties with him. You had a good run. How about you just curse him and die? Lean into the suffering. His friends, so-called, the offering and the advice that they gave, the words of things to remember in suffering, the more that his friends spoke, the more Job felt bad about himself and had more questions and uncertainty. And as we pick Job up in chapter 19, we find him in a place that we don't expect to be on Easter morning. On the edge of despair. Searching. Wanting things just to make sense. And yet as we pick up this story with Job, who the entire book is him having to wrestle with what he did not know and the questions that remain unanswered in the midst of terrible and unimaginable suffering. Job had something he wanted to say. Something so profound and impactful that he wanted it written down on a scroll. Better yet, inscribed in stone. So that people of future generations might know certainty in the midst of their questions of why and uncertainty. Job proclaimed, "I know that my Redeemer lives." That word Redeemer, we don't use it too much anymore, but if we had something similar to it today, it would be sort of like if your family had its own personal avenger. Someone that if anything or any situation threatened your family unit, the Redeemer would be the one to step up and take action. One of your family members had a debt that was past due and the debt collector was coming to get it, it was the Redeemer's job to pay for that debt. If something happened to the Redeemer's brother, if he was injured or even killed, it was the Redeemer's responsibility to take that brother's wife for himself and all of his property and kids and everything else so that that wife and kids and everything else could be contained and paid for and cared for. But Job here wasn't crying out for a long-lost relative to make sense of his suffering or avenge him. He was calling out to God. God, who is known throughout the Old Testament as a redeemer. One who is defined by his ability and wantingness to deliver, to relieve people of their distress and rescue people. And now Job is caught in the middle of having to know what it means to suffer and having to know what it means to have a redeemer. But isn't that what Job wanted most in his life? Someone to vindicate him? Someone to make sense of all of the terrible suffering? Someone to defend him against the accusations and the doubts that other people were casting on him. To defend him. Someone to deliver him from the darkness of his very real physical and very real emotional suffering. Friends, these just aren't the shouts of some angry man who had finally hit rock bottom, who was just casting out a wish upon a star from a pit. Do not miss that two-letter adjective that precedes that word redeemer. One simple letter in the Hebrew that makes all the difference. Job's confession was that his avenger was his redeemer. That if an answer was going to come out of all of the suffering and the circumstances that Job now found himself in, my Redeemer had it. Because this Redeemer knows the suffering. This Redeemer knows my pain just as intimately as Job did. In what should have been a hopeless situation, one that we are all too familiar with the stories of other people and ourselves, Job expressed hope, a living hope, made very real in a living Redeemer, a personal Redeemer. Today I'm going to assume that all of you are here because you know something about the Easter story. You confessed it more than a dozen times in just the last hymn we sang. I know that my Redeemer lives. We know the events, the facts and the figures of that first Easter. The stone rolled away from the tomb. The strips of linen that used to be covering a dead body were now placed neatly folded where Jesus' body was supposed to be. An angel sitting there, telling the women who came into the tomb terrified and bewildered that the Lord is risen. These eyewitness accounts that we have in the Gospels are all the proof we need to make Job's confession our confident confession. I know that my Redeemer lives. It's even more remarkable when you think about how much more you know about this Redeemer than Job did. You know this Redeemer's name, Jesus of Nazareth. You know where he was born, where he lived, where he went, what sorts of things he did while he was on this earth. How he became one with us and our suffering. His sacrifice, his victory over death. And yet with all this knowledge, doubts still creep in, don't they? Searching, wanting, hoping for more. I know that you know what the doubts and the deniers of the resurrection have to say about what happened that first Easter. Science and personal experience even tells me that when things are dead, they tend to stay dead. The resurrection is not easily explainable or reasonable or just a bit of knowledge that we can have in our mind. Dead thing, come to life. And Easter really gets at one of the biggest, most baffling questions that humankind has ever asked and will continue to ask until this globe stops turning. What happens when I die? And not what happens when people die and we go back into the earth. What happens when I die? Because that's one of those realities that we have to talk about on Easter. What happens when I die? Where will I go? What will I become? How do I know where I will go? And it's incredible if you work backward from your answers to those questions And you see them played out of depending on what your answer to that question is, as it's played out in life, it begins to illuminate and shape the way that you see your purpose and the reason that you're on this earth. If you believed the earth would end tomorrow, I guarantee you'd act a little bit differently today. If you believe that Jesus has risen from the dead, that makes a difference about how we think about today. And yet, despite what we know and we believe, we may still question, do I really know? I would never put Job's confession into the form of a question, but by my actions and by my attitudes in this life of suffering, there are times when my confession sounds more like, I know all there is to know about Jesus. I know all there is to know about the resurrection. But what does it matter? There's a wide chasm, friends, between knowing and knowing. Between the regurgitation of facts that are true, undeniably true, and faith in the one who saves. Even demons know knowledge about the true God, and that knowledge makes them shudder. And I begin to shudder with them if I think about my final fate or the answers to those big questions in life. If all I think about my relationship with God is it's like an academic exercise. That I know the facts and they're going to prove useful somewhere down the line, but not right now. Where all I'm left with is knowing my faults, my failures, the screwed upness of my life. I know my attempts to try and level the playing field with this God because I know something is off in my life to try and appease him so that it might turn out better down the line. I might even be aware of my sin. All of the things I've done against him and the things that I haven't done for him. I know right now what I deserve. And very quickly, friends, we can begin to understand the fear that those first women and eyewitnesses of Jesus felt. The fear of standing before the one who died alone, bearing what I deserve. Before that one opened his mouth with a word of peace. It's a word of peace that really is what Job's words are all about. And they remind us of one more thing that we can't forget. One thing that allows us to leave the past behind us and look with hope to the future. Because we have a living Redeemer, we can look forward to being with this Redeemer. When Job uttered these words, he had no idea that he was going to live 140 more years, being right on the brink of despair, wanting to give it all up. Knowing what he knew, all the scars on his body and the pain he had endured, he probably wasn't sure if he wanted to live another 140 minutes. But instead of getting down, instead of shifting blame and trying to figure out the why, he simply was optimistic about the future because of a fact. That in the end, he will stand upon the earth. Yeah, after my skin has been destroyed, and it will be, yet in my flesh, I will see God. I myself will see him. I and not another. This is all to say that the living Lord gets the final say. It's not like this Redeemer lives in some transcendent, inaccessible realm. No, but rather will live on the dust of this very earth. And that goes further than to say the true thing that Jesus will come back in flesh and blood, back to this dust of the earth. But rather, in that very place where Job is suffering, on the very ashes and the tears and the pool of tears of his lament, right in the heart of his curse-shattered mortal groaning, there, the Redeemer will stand in victory. There, the Redeemer will make himself known. There, Job will see the one for whom his soul was made and will at last be satisfied. Friends, it's out of the knowledge of our dust, out of the knowledge of our death, that one thing that everyone must have an answer for, the learned, the simpleton, and everyone in between, out of our death, we see most clearly and most truly the victory that Jesus has given us this Easter day. That victory that says, my death has been defeated. How my God opens up his mouth to scared and frightened and questioned and destined for death people, and he says, don't be alarmed. He is alive. And he goes before you, just as he told you, that I have a Redeemer, and his name is Jesus, and he lives. And he goes before me. Like a protectful, bold older brother who doesn't just give me a good pep talk before sending me on my way. He goes before me in life. And I go boldly following, clinging to the one who clung onto my sin and my shame and my questions and my doubts and my problems, and he killed them. He took away all the power that they have to separate me from God, and I stand right now, sure as I'm living, forgiven in his name. And he goes before me, even when life, the clock of life stops ticking. When I die, he goes before me as the one who has conquered life, who is the resurrection and the life, who holds the keys, the power of death and Hades. And one day he's told me that he's going to take this body, this mind so bogged down by my sin and shame, so evident of my real condition, and he's going to transform it to make it like his glorious body. And when he comes back, and he has given me no proof that he won't, there will be no more death or crying, mourning, or pain. When that day comes, and it will, friends, we will be with the Lord forever. See, this message of Easter, it makes an impact on us. The knowledge we have been given, that's been revealed to us, changes the way we look at our lives. When you endure suffering, and you will, you need not wonder if this is God getting back on you for something, or trying to find the meaning of it all. When you think about the sins that you've committed, or the scary horizon that's coming up way too quickly, I think of the sin and the failures and the faults of myself. I need not remain afraid. Even when I close my eyes in death, I don't have to go questioning what will happen to my body or the loved ones that I have or my eternal soul. Thanks to these immortalized words of our friend Job, and the sacrifice and fulfillment of Jesus, my living Redeemer, I know. Amen.